This is the Freeheel Life Podcast, episode number 29. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life Shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we are here for this week's round of Telemark history and news and the like, and stoked to be back. So, seems like I was looking at the calendar and it's only a couple months till ski season starts again, and I know I'm having conversations later with some people down in the southern hemisphere, and I guess that's the only newsworthy thing this week is if you want to get your stoke on, you can probably find some good snow pictures from down in Australia and New Zealand, and I haven't caught up with my friends in Argentina and Chile, but I'm sure they are trying to put things together as well. But I know New Zealand's doing really well. I don't even think they have any sort of coronavirus going on. So good on you, Kiwis. Well done. And I hope you guys are shredding hard. So today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Kim Miller, who's the current CEO of Scarpa North America. And Kim has been involved in the outdoor industry for nearly 40 years. He's been an integral part in developing outdoor and Telemark products over those 4 decades through his work as a retail shop owner, a rep, product side of Chouinard Equipment, which included Tua skis, the ski line category manager at Black Diamond Equipment, and he's currently the CEO of Scarpa North America, like I said. Many longtime Telemark skiers will recognize many of the products he has been involved with, including the Black Diamond 01 and 02 Telemark bindings, flick lock poles, and even the telekinesis knee pads. He's also been heavily involved with the NTN new Telemark Norm project from the beginning. So I'd like to welcome my good friend, Kim Miller. How are you, buddy?
Hey man, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for being here, man. I'm so stoked you made the time for this, because this was definitely probably the one I've been looking forward to most, and I'm glad I talked you into it. So
yeah. Well, I'm glad to take the time. It's definitely a worthy use of time. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and this is one of my favorite topics. So it's a win-win all the way around.
No, I love that. And that's, I think, over the years getting to know you, that's one of the highlights whenever I do see you is people that I don't think people maybe realize on the outside how much of a fan of Telemark you are. So that's always been, of course, my stoke factor is quadrupled whenever I see you, because I feel like I've got an ally in the biz. So it's good.
Well, I appreciate that. Actually, that makes me happy to hear, because honestly, Telemark has been a part of my life for the time frame you described and before. And so, and in skiing in general, and snow sports, as well as climbing, but telemarking, because I guess I was really getting into it when it was very, very young and not even referred to as telemarketing then. And so watching that particular facet of snow sports evolve and change in what it is today, and then thinking about what it will be and can be, it's really exciting. And I still love the sport, as you know. I still love chasing you, as you know. And yeah, I mean, I think very fondly on the last session we were on the hill together, testing skis with my Italian brothers, and boots and bindings, and just how much I still love that part of my job. I mean, what keeps me in here is my passion for the sports, really, and that's those kind of moments and those days are what really feed me.
No, I love that, man. And so maybe for the people out there, so maybe tell me a little bit about where you grew up and kind of your whole introduction into like the outdoors. I mean, you mentioned skiing and climbing, so I'm just kind of curious, like where did that all start for you?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Denver. I grew up in the inner city of Denver, and a neighborhood called Park Hill, still an awesome neighborhood. I went to East High School. I was an inner city kid, but I'd always loved the outdoors. And honestly, it was a family friend that introduced me to skiing at a really young age. And I fell in love with it from the very first time I ever tried it. I really was drawn to the mountains, though, and so even though I learned my first ski experience was on the hill, Winter Park, actually, I needed to get into the mountains, and I was following what backcountry skiing was called then, ski mountaineering, to cross country skiing. Touring, those were the terms we were using. The gear was so antiquated. Some of you probably have it over your fireplace as like some antique. That's what I learned to ski on, Bonas and Alphas and Rockefeller bindings, ironically, because the original rat trap. So, but it was always the same thing. It still is today. Just the beauty of the turn, the places that I got to go, and yeah, I think telemark skiing is the closest thing I can imagine is maybe flying. I know I felt that feeling surfing, particularly longboard surfing. So it's a really soulful sport to me, and something that I think is much more than a sport in a way. It is, to me at least. But so, that's where it all started for me. When I was a kid, I started cross country skiing. I became a PSA Nordic instructor. I went to Colorado Mountain College my first 2 years of school in Glenwood Springs, and that was a really big tipping point for me because that valley, that Roaring Fork Valley, is such a ski culture, and that's when I really started getting into the backcountry. So many great mentors of mine that I met then, and people that literally taught me things. That it was all about this, access to knowledge and to people that could mentor you. And I was super lucky to be in these places at those times. I finished up at CU. Always skiing, always telemark skiing. That was the only kind of skiing I did forever. And then I ended up needing a job after school. So eventually ended up opening my own retail store in Denver, one that I'd actually purchased from somebody who had it for many years. It was called Telemark Ski and Mountain Sports. It was probably the best business I've ever had and the funnest I've ever had at work. Opened 6 months only, and
also it was just a seasonal shop.
Seasonal only. It was only ski. It was only telemark and ski mountaineering.
That sounds familiar.
Telemark ski mountaineering, dude. You are an incarnation of that.
I was just gonna say, I always tout. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I was the first only telemark ski shop, but it sounds like Kim Miller beat me to it like 30 years ago.
Yeah, but you're doing it now, and I'm not, and that's all that matters. So
yeah,
because of the same reasons, this is like, I don't just work on skis. I work on telemark skis. It's like a mechanics. I don't just work on cars. I only work on Ferraris. That's what I do, and it's a real specialized thing. And back then, I was still pine tarring skis in my shop. I can almost smell it now, but it was so cool. I mean, we were selling Kazama. The most popular mountaineering binding was a Raymer binding. We sold Oslo, and at the time they were called Fabiano boots, which were made by Scarpa. It was really basic Normark bindings, Gatesay bindings. We had seen the 411 cable binding had just come out. Chenard equipment had just come out in 85 or something with their line of backcountry ski gear, which was like a pole, a ski, a boot, really basic.
Was that original Chenard 3-pin?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So sorry, I won't digress into all these little product details.
Oh no, that's I love it, dude. Just for context, what year did you have the shop?
I started the shop in 1985, and I ran it as a seasonal business for 3 years, and I was working for Outward Bound in the summer. Dream life, really,
Wow.
for me, and just really loving life. And then the shop was wildly successful. At that time, Telemark was really coming on, and people were really into this backcountry idea. And it was too successful. I mean, it sounds weird to say, but like, I didn't want it to get any bigger. I was totally content with what I was doing in my life, but it was the force of nature, and everybody was like, you have to get it bigger. You have to go year round. And honestly, I succumbed to the pressure. I increased the size of the store, went year round, and I really hated it for 2 years. I sold the business. In the end, it was about one of the most valuable business experiences I ever had. I sold the business. I was required to stay on for another year with a very strict non-compete after that. And it's interesting because we were the biggest dealer of Chenard Equipment's ski line at that time in Denver, Colorado. And after I sold the business, I couldn't really do what I was doing in terms of retail. And my longtime friend and climbing partner, Peter Metcalf, who was the president of Chenard Equipment in Ventura, when I told him I'd sold the business, he said, "Oh, you should come out here, California, work for a year, learn how to surf. We'll go climbing a lot, and it'll be awesome." So it sounded really too good to be true, but I didn't know what else I was going to do, so I packed up and I moved to Ojai near Ventura for a year sabbatical, which turned into 18 years actually. And so it went like this. If put context and time on it. So I started at Chenard in '87. And it was awesome, loving it, living by the sea. I've always been in Colorado or by the mountains. And then life was good. We were just rolling along, selling climbing equipment, and I was living the dream.
How many people were at Chenard Equipment in like '87? Do you remember?
In the office part, there was probably 30 people all told. Everybody, and that included the manufacturing part too. So you got to remember that we were a climbing equipment manufacturer. Right. So there's a whole production side, but if you include all the management, all the people who weren't in the factory, maybe 25 people, but a really amazing group of people. Obviously, most all went on to do amazing things. So that was a tipping point in my career, and the next tipping point, and a really awesome time, because I learned how to surf. That was the main, but also I had just enrolled in the school, the University of Chenard Equipment, which did change its name to the University of Black Diamond shortly thereafter. And the reason I say that is that it was the epicenter of where things were happening, even in climbing for sure, and a lot in Telemark. But it was a brain trust of just amazing people. And as I said, many of them went on to just continue to be there doing amazing things. But the experience that changed all of us, indelibly etched in our brains and our hearts forever, is in '89, when I'll never forget it. I was just talking to Russ Clune and Peter Metcalf. It was April 17th, Monday, April 17th, 1989. We were part of Patagonia, and they called everybody into the office and said, we need to have a big meeting. Told us they were going to close the company and chapter Chenard Equipment because of the lawsuit involving a death on climbing gear. Long story. Not for this conversation,
different podcast.
But talking about a tipping point, I mean, we were loving life one minute, and all of a sudden and somebody said we were getting shut down. And
wow.
The beautiful part of that is, like a lot of things that we're all dealing with right here and now, you know, when life throws these challenges at you, you have to reach down deep inside yourself and say, what am I going to do here? You know, crawl in a hole and just wait till it all passes, or actually engage in a way that's really positive and see if this is an opportunity. Well, it was. I mean, December 1989, we signed the papers to start Black Diamond. We went live in January 1990 at the SIA, I guess it was March then, SIA show. And that was, seriously, I think I was there 17, 18 years.
Wow.
Had a myriad of different jobs. Some of the best friends in my life that are still my best friends who were there. I think that is maybe indirectly how I met you. It was just a really great place. And but like every great thing, you know, I think it can run its course. And if you, in my life and my way of thinking, I like to be comfortable, but I also like to be always challenging myself and trying to grow. And it was really, again, the next tipping point was the decline of my father's health and my decision to move back to Colorado and be close to him, and not having a job, leaving Schnard Equipment really at an amazing time. Lots of blue sky there, but I needed to do what I needed to do personally. Ended up back here being a rep again, which was like being a rep. If you're a good one, is like being a good waiter. You can probably always find work somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, but I joined up with one of my great climbing partners, Jack Tackle, and we started this really great repping agency, and actually ended up working for Black Diamond again. And that was going well. I was having kids and doing life, settled back in Boulder, and then I got this funny call from my friends in Italy, Scarpa, and you know, one of the things that you didn't mention in the intro is that from the beginning, and I started Schnard Equipment, we were the distributors of Scarpa boots, and it was leather Telemark boots and rock shoes at that time. But there was really only 3 brands of Telemark boots at that time, as you recall: Oslo, Merrill, Scarpa. And one of the biggest probably contributions to telemarketing that came out of Black Diamond was, of course, the Terminator and plastic Telemark boots. So that was another tipping point in the sport. I was there. I was there for that and watched it, and I'm laughing because, boy, big innovations are not always easy. That took a while to perfect, but obviously it was a big and worthy project for the sport. It pushed the sport further, and it gave access to a lot more people, because it made telemarketing a little bit easier to learn, maybe. I mean, the whole evolution of products, better bindings, shaped skis, or skis with side cut and full edges, if you started when I did, and boots. And that, if you do timelines, not my career, but how my career paralleled the evolution of product development, that was a big moment, because, you know, we were ripping our boots apart, popping the bales out of our bindings, and what was happening and developing through that time was the really one of the big evolutions of telemark skiing in kind of what I describe as recent times. So, you know, I think cable bindings and plastic boots were huge, and we've seen where that's gone since then.
I was gonna ask you too, kind of going back a little bit. The one curiosity I had so Schnard was Schnard distributing the Scarpa boots as Fabiano?
No, we were actually distributing as Scarpa, and for just a little while, Fabiano was still doing some boots, Telemark boots, but Scarpa developed co-developed with Black Diamond Chenard Equipment a new line of modern Telemark boots. You may remember, because it lined up with the Tua skis, the Boot Neige, the Boot Sauvage, and the Boot Espresso. And we had skis that matched those names.
I know the skis. I didn't know the boots had that too. That's cool.
Yeah. And you'll just get on the interweb, dude. Check it out.
I probably have some kicking around. It's funny because it's cool because you were there. But one of the funny things that I always bring up to people, because we have all this history here and a lot of the old stuff, and I always point out the Chenard label on the Tua skis and talk to people about that, and even the C in the original diamond on the BD from the Chenard Equipment 3 pins and stuff. I don't think a lot of people knew that Yvon Chenard was involved in some of that early Tele stuff with Tua and some of those early backcountry bindings. So I was kind of glad you taught, and obviously that era, not to jump too far back, but I did want to hear that from you. It's just, there was obviously like a real crisscross with some of the climbing, mountaineering guys and the early Telemark guys, right?
Definitely. And to put names and faces on it, for those of you that are as old as I am, or that are historians, history fans, this was the time when people, these were the people that I was working with, Paul Parker, Jordy Margit, of course, Peter Metcalf, Art Burroughs, Murray Cunningham. I mean, the list, I won't even begin to do it justice. There were so many people involved, and they were coming to us from the east side of the Sierra, from the Wasatch, from, the different valleys in Colorado, Crested Butte, Aspen, all the epicenters, Mad River Glen. It didn't matter if you were in the West. That was the original network. And there's still a network, but it was much smaller then, and there wasn't the internet. So the way that people, and dude, it was the Wild West in the best sense of the word. You know what I mean? Like, the people were doing pickle barrel boots, and it was just a day of amazing innovation and crazy ass ideas. And it was those pioneers that were on the forefront of really making where we are today and giving us what we have today. And I'm glad I was there. It's almost like being when they launched the first rocket.
Well, that's why I didn't. Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to go back a little bit, because for someone like me that is totally into the history, dude, I eat it up, man. And it's so crazy that you were there, because especially the Chenard Equipment stuff, like, like me growing up in high school, I was actually more, funny enough, I worked at Recreation, the climbing gym, probably.
I remember. Yep.
I was the kid that cleaned the bathrooms at night, and that was in the same facility that Black Diamond, probably when you were there, in the maybe mid 90s. So, but why was I thinking about? Because I always saw the old Chenard pictures of, like, an anvil, and it's like black and white, so there was always kind of this mystique to it. But I didn't. The other thing I was going to mention is that Eastern Sierra crowd is. I interviewed Doug Robinson one time, and I don't know if did you ever know Doug?
Oh yeah, Doug Robinson, John Monnier, Bella Vidaz. Those Mimi and Bella Vidaz, those guys, it was these little pockets of awesomeness, and those guys had the East Side. Everybody had their little spots of goodness. You guys have the Wasatch, we have the Rockies, the Colorado Rockies, and we were developing our techniques, our our equipment to what we were skiing then and there. I'll never forget. But you talk about those people, and I can picture them right now. I can picture them. Our Burroughs was working Company 3 was one of the original companies in Aspen, and they were making some of the original Telemark skis, that Kazama and Karu, and they were cross-country skis. They weren't Telemark skis. Let's be really clear here. The original Fisher Europas. I mean, this is what we started on. We didn't start on that. That's what we advanced to. And we thought we were totally the shit because, we had edges and it wasn't it wasn't wood anymore. But now when I step into my kit, I'm just like, sometimes they're just like, wow, this is the difference between riding a horse and driving an F-250 or something.
Plus, you guys were wearing what cracks me up about all the old backcountry photos from that era. You guys are all wearing these gigantic backpacks, and you're making telemark turns. And I'm always like, dude, these guys are total badasses. I'm like, they've got 50 mil under their feet and somehow staying on top of the snow.
just the wool clothing and 60-40 jackets alone weighed about as much as your boots do now. It's just but it was a great time, and the times just kept continuing. We got out of that kind of mid-fat Telemark era and supercharged leather boots, and then we were into plastic, which changed so many things and made so many things need to change. We couldn't keep, bindings would break or they wouldn't stay on a ski that didn't have enough retention. So we were putting the forces beyond Alpine, because Alpine bindings release at some point. And so we had to do all this different kind of engineering. And one of the quotes at BD was commonly, "It's not rocket science." And then we'd look at each other like, actually, it is. It actually is. We're talking about aerospace materials and laminates, and so no, I couldn't be more thankful for the time I had there and what I got to do and see, and I got to do that and see those things all over the world. So that was the other great thing about my job, is I was connecting telemark skiers from Japan to Oceania and New Zealand and Australia and Europe, and it was really just amazing. I mean, the same way you are now, but it was a much, much smaller community then, and really just true believers, the best of the best.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I mean, to finish your question, sorry to ramble, but it was let's see, when did I start? 2006, I started at Scarpa, and Scarpa decided to be their own brand in North America, not be distributed by anybody else, and really try to go to the next level. And it's a different kind of a hard to describe the differences, but being a distributor is different than being an extension of a brand like we are a subsidiary. So here we are, 2014. This is 2020, so we've been here a while. We've continued to do all the things we've done, and obviously skiing's super important to us now still. There's a lot of things that are important to us in the outdoor sports footwear and snow sports footwear. Obviously, alpine touring was another big tipping point and hugely impactful for Telemark as from a business standpoint. And also just, like all of these things, alpine touring came in. There was a kind of a mass exodus from Telemark for a bit there because of a lot of reasons. But I think it had a lot to do with the limitations of Telemark gear and probably an aging population of kind of the original core, the OG Telemark skiers who were feeling their knees and maybe not as fit as they were.
And they were accessing, like we always say, backcountry skiing grew through Telemark, and then when you had AT accessible, it seemed like a lot of people kind of did. People that didn't actually want to make the tele turn probably kind of bailed out at that point because they're like, oh, well, I can lock it down at the top instead of having to do this crazy turn.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what we did with Telemark actually was the indication and actually kind of the another tipping point for alpine touring. And people were saying, wow, I have all this great Telemark gear now, but it does have limitations. It's heavy. It doesn't have all the features of alpine touring. And so they flipped, and it was a lot because it was easier to go uphill and easier to go downhill because you could alpine ski. Even though almost all the telemarkers I know that are good telemark skiers are good skiers, and they can easily throw a parallel turn in at any point. And I mean, when I lived in the Wasatch, I laugh sometimes, like, oh, I saw a telemark skier do a telemark turn. And my crew who were, and we were skiing in terrain where sometimes you felt better parallel skiing. And as I have always said, the reason telemark setup is the ultimate setup is you can do anything you want. You want a parallel, you want a telemark. There's no, I'm down to the flats, release my heel, take my foot out. It's just like skate away. It's really ultimately versatile. And now that the equipment has advanced so far, it's a lot shorter learning curve, I think. Plus, I think people are really looking for variety, and the same thing, you said it earlier, who is the profile of the telemark skier today? Who are we making product for? Wow, it's a really broad range of people. I mean, people who want to take a T2 and do a traditional hut trip, a touring hut trip. Probably 75 millimeter bindings, maybe even a 3-pin binding or that style of binding, up to people who want to do big mountain free ride and do everything and anything that is being done on alpine skis.
Yep.
And so that's a big
swath of people.
It's a big range of uses as well. We're staying our course with telemark. Okay. I should say, I've been telling you about my personal life, and I just changed hats on you. So I said we, the we word. So anyhow, I'm at Scarpa now. Let's fast forward. I'm doing my job. I'm the CEO, and fast forward, and today, let's talk about today and what I see. Go ahead. Sorry.
I've got to, before we go too far, because you brought up a good point about how broad of a range of people there are. And there was one other little history nugget I wanted to ask you about. So Scarpa North America started 2006. Is that what it was?
It started July 2005.
2005.
I actually was preoccupied with the birth of Cody, who you know, and my youngest son. So I had a little bit of something going on. I had declined to, and honestly, my father was very sick. Cody was born. My dad passed away in September. I told Scarpa I would come to work for them and start in January of 2006, and sat down in the chair I'm sitting in right now.
Wow.
And grabbed the wheel.
And so people, if people didn't catch it, basically Black Diamond was distributing Scarpa up to that point, and then obviously Scarpa North America starts. And a couple years later, this is what I wanted to ask you about, because this is a topic that's kind of come up with some recent podcasts, is when Scarpa developed the first NTN boot, the TX, it had tech toe and tech heel in it. And I wanted to hear from you, if possible, because what was the reasoning in that era? Because that was probably 2009-ish, 8?
Yeah.
somewhere in there. And I was curious if you could just kind of shed some light on why that boot with those features came into existence at that point in time.
Sure, be glad to, because I was integral to that decision. It was this simple reason. When I looked at the setup and I said, guys, this is you describe it how you want to, but in which order. But this is a Telemark boot that can Alpine tour, or this is an Alpine touring boot that can Telemark. And the phrase that we used, and I said, this is the one boot, one world vision. And a vision for maybe 15 of us, but it was really interesting because what I was looking at, and Davide Persotto, my colleague, the owner of Scarpa, the head of all R&D and production, and a guy you know well,
yep.
My brother, this guy is an amazing guy. I can't even describe. You could describe it to your listeners, but there is nobody, if we say we describe people like different parts of a car, Davide is the engine of Scarpa in terms of innovation. And he said, I see the idea. Let me play with this. And literally he goes into his shop and I don't know, makes some noise. Later he's like, this is what you're talking about. And I'm like, that's pretty much exactly what I was thinking. And I said, look, okay, I have two accomplices in this, Davide and an old friend of yours, Chris Clark.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So talking about being surrounded by two crazy guys, sandwich between two crazy. Oh, innovation, creativity, motivation to do something different, that not for the sake of doing different or even selling a bunch of them, because we could, and it was a good idea. Like this is how it started. Chris and I were traveling back and forth all the time from Europe to work on ski line product, AT, Telemark. We were constantly lugging all this gear back and forth. And I said, I'm so sick of this. Wouldn't it be cool if we could and we're both avid Telemark skiers. And it's like, if I had it my way, I'd have a boot that worked in any setup. I just carry my boots, get the skis, whatever I wanted. And that's where it started. And that is weirdly an idea that, if you think about the cyclical nature of innovation, is back on the table right now. People are asking us, okay, primarily because the Meijo has that capability. It's not the first binding that's had that capability, but it is the one that I think is probably maybe perfected that. I'm not saying I know enough to say that, but a lot of people have asked, why can't we lock our heel down? And they say, well, that's Alpine touring. And it's also adds a whole nother dimension to what we're doing here. And it's not only from design and engineering, from safety and security, but liability. And at some point, it'll happen regardless, because enough people are doing these garage projects that it'll come out that way.
It's kind of hard to have one. I mean, thank you for clarifying that, number one, because I always am trying to people that are just getting into tele right now, they see the tech toe bindings like Meijo, Lynx, TTS. They think that the tech toe in the boot was always there for these bindings, but
I know.
but basically those bindings came into existence because you and Chris Clark and David decided to put in a tech toe, and it's the chicken and the egg thing. You're exactly right. And the other thing I'll say is those inserts, they are not cheap. So to put those in all Telemark boots for everybody, that wasn't practical either. But we were really remember this other fact, that at that time we had the NTN binding, which the boot was designed to fit, and we had primarily Dynafit bindings, and really within the Dynafit family there was only two bindings that were really being sold and distributed with any volume. We collaborated with Dynafit
to build we referred to it as the puck, but it was basically the insert that needed to go under the ball of the foot of the Telemark boot to block it out so it wouldn't flex under the ball of the foot. Because once the boot flexes, it changes the length of the boot and the release dynamics. And so that was a big worry. And do you remember the part I'm talking about? Some of you may.
Oh, they're very, they are highly valuable. The
slide in,
the toe puck. We call it the toe puck. Yeah,
the toe puck. And so, yeah.
Black market stuff.
And people figured out, well, I could just duct tape a wine cork on there and it works just as well. And that's when you start saying, everybody stop, because this is getting crazy. Now there's 20 AT bindings on the market. There was no way to really do that. There was no way to say, in this setup, this is a reasonably safe setup.
Right.
And we were breaking all the rules, which is fine if it's you and 5 of your buddies messing around in the back shop. But when you're doing it commercially, you have a responsibility. We have a responsibility, we all do, as you do too, as a retailer, to vet these things and curate our choices of products so that we try to minimize the risk to our customers and our peeps. It's part of our responsibility. And I grew up in the climbing equipment world, so I take that really seriously.
Yeah.
But now with all the whack and dangle combinations of boots and bindings, it's relevant, very relevant now. And it's not even the weird things, the kind of anomalies. We're seeing a lot of people trying to shove AT boots into alpine bindings. Same thing. It's like, that's not really a great idea. It's not the same norms. So we have norm confusion in Telemark bindings now, I guess you could say as well. So, but through chaos comes order. And I think what we're seeing right now in Telemark is actually a beautiful thing. It might be creating angst for you and me and some of our customers and the community, but this is good because energy, investment, creativity, a lot of people are talking, I think it's an exciting time. I really do. And I've seen, as I kind of described to you, a lot of really exciting times in my career. God, when I say that, it makes me feel old. I don't feel old. Actually, listening to myself talk here, I'm like, geez, total OG.
You're young at heart, but man, you've seen some goodness over the years too.
Well, I have to go out with people like you, and I have many more trips and days with people like you, and specifically you, because I want to stay that way. I want to stay active. I want to stay relevant and not lose touch with the street, and especially when it's the sports that are dear to me. So you can't be. You got to be inside looking out on these things. You can't be looking on the sidelines going, I see this sales report and these market share reports, and this is what I think's going on. It's like, you need to be out there on your hands and knees in the snow going, how the hell did you break this binding, Josh? But that's what we do, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's what's cool is talking to you always gets me excited because you've had such a long history. It's not like you're someone new coming into these ideas. It's like you've literally seen from 3-pin bindings to tech toe NTN, and it's probably looking back. I mean, even when I'm talking to you, I'm like, man, that's so weird. Like, you guys made a decision on a boot, which then created a whole different segment of bindings that you had no idea was going to happen. So it's like, it is kind of exciting though. And I try to explain that to people too, because, you do hear a lot of the keyboard warriors out there that are like, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's nothing happening in Telemark. And I'm like, man, all right. I started telemarking in 93. And to be honest, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, in comparison to past years. So, and it's fun to see some of these small, like we were talking about before the podcast, a lot of these independent brands like M Equipment, 22 Designs, like it's cool to see them sort of, getting a fire and innovating, and I don't know, maybe that's me looking at it like wishing it was like the early Chouinard days or something, but it seems a little more Wild West because there's not, these are like companies with a couple people. They're not massive corporations, and they're people trying to figure it out. So
yeah, I think one of the things that we're all lucky for is that there's still a lot of room for innovation. And just if you did that timeline, and I can give you lots of examples of what's happening right now, but just a quick run through some of this, when I look back, alpine skiing, the Marker Duke, the Shape Ski, those things were hugely, the plastic boot, hugely impactful. Now, the Solomon Shift binding, for example, game changer, total game changer, because alpine skiers are looking for variety. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking for the SUV setup. They want to kind of AT ski, but that backcountry has a whole nother set of challenges and things you need to learn. And so it's about adventure. It's about people really wanting to try something different and new, or be able to, if they so decide to do that. But within the Telemark world, I know it seems like nothing's happening, and there are moments when that's true. Really, if you say what's happening, nothing's happening in innovation. I would also say that not everything is visible to the general world about what's happening or not happening, first of all. And then secondly, it happens in different areas. Okay, nothing's really happened in skis for a long time, for example. Everybody's looking at the boot binding relationship. But take bindings, for example. Man, tons of activity, tons and tons of innovation. And I applaud that and really honor these guys that are sitting in their garage, from people like Mark Lingel to Pierre at Mejo, to the Norwegians at Rodefella and Torsten, all people The one thing that I can tell you runs through all of those guys' veins is pure passion for the sport. They all still telemark, and they all do this because they love it. I'm sure they're all really smart guys. They could do a lot of things, as you could, but somehow this is where we are, and this is where we've chosen to make our stand, and I like it. I think it's a good place. And there's a lot to look forward to in Telemark. I really do believe that.
Well, that's what I was going to, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a good segue into, I mean, you brought up a good thing is, not everything is visible, and I think that in terms of visibility, like with Scarpa, like what can you tell us about, like, what's on the docket for Scarpa? Like, is there things in the future, things maybe that have been a little hidden that you can pull the curtain back a little bit and let us know? Or
yeah, especially on this topic, to this group, to this community, my community of Telemark brothers and sisters, I can be pretty candid, because first of all, I would say that we realize, and you kind of spoke to this earlier, our responsibility in all of this, and weirdly how closely, in a situation like Telemark, how closely what we do will impact the general sport and the popularity. That's a heavy kind of responsibility to walk around with, but we willingly accept that, because we know that's true. We are passionate and really care and devoted to Telemark, and it's still a really important part of our business. So I don't want to sound like this is all philanthropic. That's, philanthropy is great, but it's hard to sell to a board of directors when you're asking to create a new tool for a ski boot mold that costs $1 million. You better walk into the room with a little more in your back pocket
Yeah.
We want to spread love and goodness across the telemark world. And we'll have the undying gratitude of 10,000 people. But no, it's not that. It's way bigger. All factors that come into it. So not to do the dance of the Wulan master here, I'll get to your point, but your question. But this is it, really. We care about it. We're working on it. We haven't stopped working on it. We have had interruptions in that. We're actually kind of dealing with an interruption, a disruption of magnitude we haven't really ever dealt with, any of us, right now. But that hasn't changed our plans. It's delayed them a little bit, to be honest. But I'll say it right here in front of you and everybody else. We are working on new telemark boots. We have been for a long time. The trick here is, how do we really do something that is a contribution that makes a difference, and how make sure that we're thoughtful enough to not make the wrong decision. And the decisions that we're facing right now, we basically have the upper part of a new telemark boot very well roughed out and in testing mode. But now, to be totally honest with you, what we're pondering, researching, listening to everyone about, getting opinions, as you know, because yours is one I've asked for, the norm. What's the norm? And okay, 75 millimeter really isn't on the menu right now. We're not doing a lot with 75, so I'm sorry for all of you 75 millimeter lovers out there. We see the future really going in the direction of this more modern combination of norms, which is the tech norm, the NTN norm, some variation, some hybrid variation that can work in both. And it's become a bit of a brain teaser, because honestly, we want to make sure that you can ski on whatever system you want. It's very hard to try to determine right now which way to go definitively. So we're testing both norms. Look, dude, I'm not telling you, you don't know you know all the things I'm telling everybody right now, because you're within my secret cadre of testers. So don't try to hide yourself from the truth. Anyhow, it's true, everyone. Madsen knows way more than he's allowed to tell you, but he's an honorable guy.
You're blowing my cover.
That's why it's why he's on my team. But let me tell you this: he represents you guys very well. He is my humble warrior, and he will crush my private parts if he thinks for a minute I'm doing something stupid or wrong. But he represents well, and he talks to every side of the issue, problem, solution. So you should be very happy and send him a 6-pack of beer. Anyhow, I mean it.
Thanks, brother.
This is where I need. Look, who do you think CEOs ask when they need good, solid opinions? Have you ever thought about that? Because we don't know all the answers. In fact, the ones that think they do are the most dangerous people in the world. So
yeah, that's
decisions like this are big. Listening is hard. It's really important to just listen, take our time. We could pop out a boot by fall 21, have it on the market, and I would do it with a lot of worry in my mind that we didn't do enough due diligence to make sure that was the right decision. I don't know what the future holds, but I think the boot upper is really cool. The best way I can describe it is if you're an AT and tele skier, you'll see a lot of similarities to your AT boots. It's going to feel very svelte and compact. It's lighter. It's got more range of motion. It's got more modern mechanisms like ski walk. It's really, man, if you covered up the bottom and the bellows, the bottom centimeter and the bellows, you would know it was a telemark boot. But that part is pretty dialed in. Now we're just really trying to figure out What are our options on binding interface? Do we try to do both? Do we do two different norms? We're worried that we're going to impact a lot of other people by this decision. Commercially, the sports, we want to know what our retailers think. We want to know what you guys think. The skiers, most importantly, the skiers, what do you want? Tell Josh what you need, what you want. Let us know, because we are about to cut steel, as we say in the tooling business, and it's hard to go back on that. So I will add that Josh knows all of my colleagues, my very special colleagues in Italy. He's worked with them. He has for a long time. He knows the guys at Rotafel. He knows Pierre. He is actually really in a hub of a lot of surrounded by a lot of really important decision makers and leaders and thought leaders, as well as business leaders in the industry. So you can channel through him. So that's important, because we're always looking, and the surveys that Josh does are really helpful for us to get real raw data from the street, as I like to say, from the peeps that are actually doing it and don't have all these hidden agendas. So keep your feedback flowing and let us know. But sorry, I digress.
No, that's great, man. Thanks for the kind words too. I mean, I think what you said it's cool, and sometimes taking it slow is very much an important characteristic of leading to the next thing. I think people have forgotten that sometimes.
We are the distributors of Rotafella. That's for sure true, and very loyal to them. They're great friends of ours, and they've done a lot for the sport. I mean, historically speaking, as a binding manufacturer, maybe no one's done more. Just their tenure in this space. But we also want to be thinking about binding in a neutral way about bindings, and thinking about what's the best function, what's the need, what do people want, not what do we distribute. And this will help everybody. I think in Telemark, it's a small enough industry, if you will, that we will all live or die together. I know that for sure. And I think that the camaraderie that is shared between all the brands is really unique, because everybody realizes that, and we're not trying to use so much these innovations as competitive advantages as much as we are trying to move the sport. And I really think that's sincerely true. And we're friends. We talk to each other all the time. So don't try bullshitting one of us, because the other ones will hear about it right away.
Yeah, it's a small room.
It's a very small room, and we take up a lot of space. So,
oh, that's funny. Well, I think that's super promising, and I appreciate you kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit for people to hear, and yeah, I love what you said. Just like, you know, yes, it's taken some time, but I think all of us as Telemark skiers can appreciate good decision making over just throwing something out there to appease, people's impatience. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I think that was a good little. Hopefully, all you listeners out there have a little imagination going now as to what this may look like, and I think it brings up some fun questions about some of the other aspects of the boot. But I think that's my brother. I think this is a good spot for us to kind of finish this up. Anything else you'd like to add on behalf of Scarpa or your tenure as probably the longest running tele advocate in the outdoor space?
I know there are others. I just want to thank you and thank your listeners for the opportunity to speak with you and to do that in person. You know me pretty well, Josh. I'm kind of shy. It's weird to be in that position sometimes, but I can talk about business, but when you want to talk about me, my personality, opinions and stuff, I'm maybe a less anxious to do that, but with you guys and with you especially, and you did talk me into it, and I committed to it, but willingly and happily. I guess the other thing I would say, two words of advice, or two things I would recommend, is keep the faith on the boots and the innovation. It's coming. There is no doubt about if, it's when. And the second thing is, don't stop telemark skiing. Don't stop ever, because it's really hard to start again. And I've watched a lot of my friends try to juggle that. So do not stop. You don't have to do it all the time. You can mix it up with your other things, but don't stop, because it's a lifetime sport and there's nothing else like it. And that's all I got, man.
I love that, man. Well, on that note, thank you for listening, everybody. This has definitely been one of my favorite podcasts we've done so far, and big thanks to Kim for coming on. If you're checking this out, how you can support us, I always like to mention you can always make a donation of your choice to paypal.me/freeheellife. You can always shop at freeheellife.com. Check out the articles on telemarkskier.com. And like Kim said, I love getting your guys' feedback, and probably time to do another survey. But in the meantime, you can reach me at podcast@freeheellife.com. And, feel free to share your feelings. I always like to pass that stuff on to the people I talk to, like Kim and Scarpa and all the other manufacturers that I have the opportunity to chat with regularly. So thanks for listening. Take a second to rate and review us. Don't forget, all of us are protectors of this beautiful turn. And until next week, spread telemark always, my friends. Peace.